Aloha, I'm Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. As a veteran of 2 Middle East deployments, I know firsthand the cost of war. I know how important it is that our Commander-in-Chief has the sound judgment required to know when to use America's military power and when not to use that power. As a Vice Chair of the DNC, I'm required to stay neutral in Democratic primaries, but I cannot remain neutral any longer. The stakes are just too high. That's why today I'm endorsing Senator Bernie Sanders to be our next President and Commander-in-Chief of the United States. We need a Commander-in-Chief who has foresight, who exercises good judgment, and who understands the need for a robust foreign policy which defends the safety and security of the American people, and who will not waste precious lives and money on interventionist wars of regime change. Such counterproductive wars undermine our national security and economic prosperity. As these elections continue across the country, the American people are faced with a very clear choice. We can elect a president who will lead us into more interventionist wars of regime change, or we can elect a president who will usher in a new era of peace and prosperity. It's with this clear choice in mind that I'm resigning as Vice Chair of the DNC so that I can strongly support Bernie Sanders as the Democratic nominee for President of the United States. And now I ask you, stand with me and support Bernie Sanders.
Yo creo que siempre voy a luchar mientras yo vea a mis hijos felices y que ellos estén bien. Voy a seguir luchando por ellos para darles lo mejor. Pues mis hijos son como el motor de mi vida que le da. Mi familia aquí son mis 3 niños. Aquí en Immokalee, Florida. Immokalee es un pueblo pequeño, pero está lleno de gente muy trabajadora y también muy amable. Es un pueblo muy bonito, en medio de todo lo que hay, lo que ha habido en el trabajo, abusos en el campo. Yo cuando vine de México, empecé a trabajar en el campo. Pues los tomates que yo pisco son los que se usan como en ensaladas, ¿cómo se va a decir? Americanos. Había más abusos de los patrones hacia sus trabajadores o de que no les proveían lo necesario como agua o los baños. Los patrones se enojaban de que si ya no querían seguir trabajando, hasta se agarraban a golpes. Solamente en las noches a veces uno se pone como a veces hasta a llorar porque no le alcanza. También a los niños les afecta porque a veces no alcanzaba para todo lo que era como la comida. No conocen, no saben por todo lo que uno tiene que pasar, porque tenemos familias. Yo empecé a participar como a las protestas por comida justa, fue en el 2010. Comida Justa está pidiendo que las grandes corporaciones paguen como 1 centavo más por libra de tomate para que así también les llegara a los trabajadores lo que es justo. Empecé a participar porque me pareció que es bueno que haya personas que se preocupan por mejorar las condiciones de trabajo, porque es ahí donde menos se preocupan la gente.
In January of 2008, I went to Immokalee what I discovered was a human tragedy. Workers were being paid starvation wages and subjected to abusive labor practices.
Bernie Sanders, él se interesó en la vida de los trabajadores y quiso saber de las luchas políticos que muchas veces nunca llegan aquí a Immokalee.
Just in a few hours from now, we need everybody here to show up, to bring your friends, to bring your relatives, to show the country, to show this whole nation that we are ready for real inclusion, economic justice for all, right here. Let's start it right here, you guys. And I want to tell you, I'm so proud to be born right here in the state of Michigan. I lived here for the first 22 years of my life, and then they dragged me to Minnesota. But you guys right here in Michigan got an extra congressman in me, let me tell you. And I want you to know that as I have served in the U.S. Congress with my good friend Bernie Sanders, he has been there for the American worker. He has been there for the American family. He has never stopped fighting for us, which is why I'm so proud to support Bernie Sanders, everybody. And I just want to let you know that everybody in this whole country is a part of this thing when Bernie Sanders is president of the United States. When the anti-Muslim hate was raging real ugly back in December, y'all remember Trump was talking all of that stuff? We had to explain to our kids that no, your neighbors don't hate you. No, your neighbors actually do like you. It's just that one weird guy over there. But let me tell you what Bernie Sanders did. Bernie Sanders said, Keith, let's go to a mosque and sit right down in the mosque in Washington, D.C. And we'll have a Christian, we'll have a Catholic priest, and we'll have a Jewish rabbi. We'll all sit down there and talk about how we are all part of this American family. Let's do that. You know what? That is exactly what we did. We sat down there, we denounced that hate, and we talked about how this country is for all Americans. And no matter who you are, what your religion is, or what color you are a part of this great nation. And we're not going to let nobody divide us, because guess what? You know what I mean? We're going to need everybody to restore real economic justice for all in America. We can't put nobody away. You know what? The fact of the matter is the money has gone to the very tip top of this economy, and a lot of super wealthy people have been able to do well, but so many other people are struggling. And the only way to overcome that is get vast numbers of Americans, just like right here in good old Dearborn, to come together, right? Divided. We're going to stay united, and we're going to fight for prosperity for everybody in this country. And you know what? It doesn't matter if you're Mexican, or it doesn't matter if you're Muslim, or Jewish, or Christian, or Catholic, or if you don't practice any religion, or maybe you're Chaldean, or maybe you're Hindu, or whatever you are. You're welcome right here. We say welcome. We say Ahlan wa sahlan to you. What we believe this nation is all about. And I just want to tell you, Bernie Sanders, whether it's domestic policy or foreign policy, Bernie is always for the people. You know, I was so proud of Bernie Sanders when Bernie said, you know what, we don't need to invade Iraq. He voted no on invading Iraq. He said, he was smart enough. No, it's true. He wasn't the Secretary of State or nothing. But he was still smart enough. He was smart enough to know that a country that had been under a no-fly zone for 12 years and for 2/3 of its landmass wasn't about to attack the United States. And when George Bush said, let's attack Iraq, he said, no, I'm not going to do that. He said no on that. And I think we need that kind of judgment in the White House. What do you think? When Obama said, we're going to try to work out a deal with the Iranians to try to make sure that we don't have any wars or don't spread any nuclear weapons. Bernie said, I'm for that, and I support that, and I back that 100%. You remember that? Yeah. Bernie's instincts are for peace in this world and dignity for all human beings, no matter where they live. And domestically, right here in good old United States, right here in Flint, Bernie has always been against these bad trade deals which have hit Michigan so hard. I remember when I was a kid working for a city councilman in the city of Detroit, and every day we would see 100 laid off here, 100 laid off there. All these companies laying off workers here and opening up plants all over the world as Americans right here in Michigan were losing their jobs. Bernie has always been against NAFTA. He's been against CAFTA. He's been against the Colombia Free Trade Agreement. He's against the Peru Free Trade Agreement because he knows that we need fair trade, not just free trade.
Also today, she is scheduled to take the stage just before.
Shut down here and reduce your labor costs by exploiting somebody else abroad, many of them will do it. So we cannot let them do it. We got to set the rules up to put American workers in a position where they can make a good, honest living. And that means that we don't just open up the door for the lowest wage, most exploitive government in this world. He's been against it while other people have been open to some of these kind of deals. I think Bernie is somebody we can really trust in this area. What do you think? Chair of something called the Progressive Caucus in the U.S. Congress. The Progressive Caucus, let me tell you about the Progressive Congress. Progressive Caucus was started by Bernie Sanders. Yeah! Long before I ever became chair, ever came to Congress, Bernie Sanders was there organizing people, bringing us together. And let me tell you, what that means is, it doesn't just mean standing for the right things, because Bernie stands for the right things, but also means engaging people and getting the win together in the right way. It means involving the grassroots movement, pulling together that great revolution we've been talking about of masses of Americans, young people, old people, people who are in the sandwich generation, people of all kinds, masses of Americans coming on out, and that is how Bernie does business. And so there was a contractor doing business for the federal government. The federal government was doing contracts with these different companies that were doing food service and janitorial service and different kind of services like that. And they said, you know what, we can't survive on $7.25 an hour no more. We can't survive on $7.25. And so what they did is they came out and they demanded they get paid more money. When we went out there, we stood with those workers, all of us, hand to hand, shoulder to shoulder. The lead person out there was Bernie Sanders, what I'm telling you. Standing with the janitors, standing with the drivers, standing with the security guards. That was Bernie Sanders. Bernie was the one who was not afraid to come out of that ivory tower of that Capitol building and stand with the people who were struggling hard to make ends meet. Now I'm going to tell you, Bernie not only stands with the people fighting for a better wage, Bernie stands for the young people of the United States. College, we want debt-free college, no question. But it does shock me that when Bernie says we need to have tuition-free college, they all just believe that it's not possible. Who believes that if we fight for tuition-free college, just like they got in France, Germany, Denmark, who believes we can win it? But it's going to require all of us in this room and all of us all over this country to stand up and fight and stand with Bernie Sanders as he makes this demand. And when people tell you, oh, it's not realistic, oh, it can't really happen, well, you tell them that we don't ever give up on our dreams. We don't give up on our dreams. In this country of ours, there was a time in our nation's history when for somebody who was black to sit on the front of the bus was just unrealistic. Some of y'all may remember that time. Some of you may have just read about it. But some people said it was unrealistic. But there were some dreamers out there who believed in the best of America. There was a time in this nation's history when for a woman to cast a vote was just considered ridiculous and unrealistic. It had to be people like Susan B. Anthony and others who demanded that, look, if women are equal in God's sight, they're going to be equal at the ballot box here in the United States. And guess what? They won it because they fought for it. Don't let anybody tell you that we cannot have free tuition in our nation's universities, that we can't have debt-free college, that we cannot have a peaceful and just foreign policy for our nation. Don't let anybody tell you that, because we can have it. It is within the grasp of us if we will only stand together and fight for it and believe in it. And we need a candidate who's going to do the same thing, who's going to be the standard bearer in front, demanding that we win these things. And I want to know, do you think that is my man Bernie Sanders? Bernie Sanders, because in the early 1960s in this country, Bernie Sanders can be found fighting for fair housing in Chicago, even getting arrested doing it. Most politicians don't put that on their resume, you know what I mean? But Bernie was a brave enough man to risk arrest because he believed in what we were fighting for, fair housing for all. He knew that it wasn't the reality of 1961, but it could be the reality of 2016 if there were some proud, brave people who weren't going to back down and weren't going to quit and weren't going to tell people, oh, don't, just be realistic. So this is the campaign where people who have their sights set high. This is a very patriotic campaign that believes that when we draw people in and we fight for what's right, we can win it. Don't you know, just the other day we blew them out in Maine. Did you see that win back? I don't know what it was. And I want to tell you that the same victory is right within our grasp right here in Michigan. Right here in Michigan. It's within our hand if we will only reach for it and grab it. And I'm telling you though, when you go to Bernie, when you campaign with Bernie, you see that the people and the energy and the fire is on Bernie's side. Just like in this room right now. You can see it, you can feel it, it's right here up in your chest. But there's a whole lot of other folks who got other kind of plans, and maybe they're not at rallies. You know what I mean? So what does that mean? That means you and I have got to go out and get our friends, we have got to get our neighbors. We got 24 hours to do it, people. We got 24 hours to go grab your neighbors, your friends, your cousins, your uncles, your co-workers. We got 24 more hours. There's a whole lot of people right here in the state of Michigan who will not make a decision until they get to that ballot box. But if you're in their ear and you're telling them, look, did you know Bernie actually stood for $15 an hour minimum wage? Bernie stands for that. You know what I mean? If you tell them, you know what? Bernie actually believes that we can fight climate change and win, and he's been standing against Keystone since before other people got around to it. You know what I'm saying? If you will get in their ear and you will talk to them and you will get on that phone and you will knock on those doors, we can win this thing. The real key is will to win. Who has the will to win? Does anybody have the will to win? I'm telling you now, I got on the flight early this morning to come back to my hometown because I was sure that the people of Dearborn, the people of Flint, the people of Detroit, I'm talking about all over the great state of Michigan, are ready for some real change. And we're not going to lower our sights. We're not going to say that it can't be done because we know that it already has begun. And that's why I'm so proud to introduce to you my friend and yours, Bernie Sanders.
Roy for his remarks. But mostly, this is what I want to say about this guy. This guy is one of the great members of the United States Congress. He has spent his political life taking on special interests, fighting for a peaceful world, fighting for economic justice, racial justice, environmental justice. Keith, thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you. I want to tell you something else about Keith and how the real political world works. Throughout this campaign, we have taken on the financial establishment and all of the big money interests. We have taken on the political establishment. In Minnesota, Keith he didn't mention this, we took on the 2 United States senators who supported Secretary Clinton. We took on the governor who supported Secretary Clinton. We took on almost everybody in the legislature who supported Secretary Clinton. We had Keith Ellison on our side. We won by a landslide. Keith basically told you everything that I was going to tell you, so I'm going home. But here is the point, and Keith made the most important point that I can make to you, is that real change never takes place from the top on down. It always takes place from the bottom on up. And if you think back historically at the struggle for workers' rights, you remember that workers came together. Some of them were beaten, some were jailed, some were killed. But they said, you know what? Workers are entitled to collective bargaining. They're entitled to negotiate a contract. We will form a union. Took place as Keith indicated, do you remember, we often forget, in 1924 is when women got the right to vote, less than 100 years ago. Now, how did that happen? You think it happened because some president signed something? It happened because women and their male allies struggled for decade after decade. Some died, some went to jail, some were on hunger strikes. And they said, you know what? In America, women will not be treated as second-class citizens. Civil rights movement. It has been going on for hundreds of years, where African Americans, before slavery, after slavery, and their white allies said that in the United States of America, racism and bigotry and segregation are not acceptable. And hundreds of thousands and millions of people stood up and fought back. We still have a long way to go, but that is how change takes place. So when people tell you, we can't do this, we can't do that, all that they are saying is that they don't have the guts to take on the powerful special interests who are preventing that change from occurring. We do. Before I go any further, I just had the honor of meeting with a number of Arab American leaders right here in Dearborn. And what I want to say is that if there is anything we are going to accomplish together, is we are going to end bigotry in this country once again. The Donald Trumps and his friends are not going to prevail in scapegoating minorities in this country. to be successful in attacking and denigrating our Muslim friends and neighbors. Or our Mexican friends and neighbors. They are not going to divide us up. What we all know, and I speak as somebody who has a lot of personal experience in this. My dad was an immigrant. My dad came to this country without a penny in his pocket, couldn't speak English, from Poland at the age of 17. Never made much money. But he loved this country because of the opportunities that it gave him, the ability to raise two of his kids, first in the family to actually go to college. That's what America is about. We will not let Trump divide us up. We will come together. What this campaign is about is doing something very, very radical in American politics. It is called telling the truth. And the truth is not always pleasant. And I wish I could tell you just wonderful things. But it is important for us to understand reality. Because if we do not understand that reality, it is in fact impossible for us to go forward. Let me tell you about reality. Reality number one. No president of the United States, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do what has to be done to deal with the enormous problems facing the middle class and working families of this country. No president can do it alone. Now, that is not just rhetoric. That is not just words. That is reality. And you know why that is true? Because, and again, no other candidate for president will tell you this. The people who have the power in this country, the billionaire class, Wall Street, corporate America, the corporate media who determine what we see and what we hear, the large campaign contributors who have so much influence over the political process. No one can defeat this group of people because they have so much power alone. No president can do it. The only way we do defeat them and create an America that works for us all rather than the few is when millions of people stand up, fight back, and demand to have a government which represents all of us, not just the 1%. Story, which is very gratifying. What I have been trying to do from day one in this campaign is to bring working people, bring young people, bring people who have given up on the political process back into that process so they can stand up and fight for their kids and their parents and their own lives. Yesterday I saw something that was enormously touching to me. It was a caucus in Maine. There were photographs on the internet of a line a half-mile long. Half-mile long of people waiting hours to get in to cast their vote. We won Maine with 64%. Turnout in the history of Maine caucuses. Now, we have similar results in Kansas. In other words, here is what's happening. If we allow the same old to continue, you're going to get the same old results. And those same old results will be the rich get richer, middle class continues to disappear, and too many of our people live in poverty. If we want to change that same old, we have to understand that politics is not a football game. Football is a spectator sport. We watch great athletes do their things. Politics and democracy means that every single one of us has to be actively involved in determining Tomorrow is a very important day here in Michigan. It is your primary. If there is a large voter turnout, we will win. As Keith said, bring your family members, bring your co-workers, bring your neighbors. Let's show the establishment that we are not satisfied with the status quo. We want real change. Obviously, my opponent tomorrow on the ballot is going to be Secretary Clinton. And let me just speak for a moment about some of the differences that exist between Secretary Clinton and myself. Number one, in this country today, we have a corrupt campaign finance system. And as a result of Citizens United, what we have seen is the emergence of a whole lot of super PACs into which billionaires and Wall Street corporate America are putting huge amounts of money. Now, Secretary Clinton has several super PACs. Her largest recently reported that in the last filing period, she raised $25 million, including $15 million from Wall Street. Secretary Clinton has also gone behind closed doors to talk to some of the major Wall Street financial institutions. She gets paid $225,000 per speech. Not bad for a day's work. Now, I kind of figure that if you're going to get paid $225,000 to give a speech, it must be a brilliant speech. And if it is such a brilliant speech, surely you're going to want to share that brilliant speech with the people. Secretary Clinton also said that, she would release the transcripts if other people release their transcripts. Here it is, I'm ready to release my transcripts. Are you ready? Here it is, you got it. Ain't nothing there. No speeches for all. Now, we, on the other hand, have taken a different approach in how we raise funds. And how we do it is to go to working families and middle-class people. And what's happened over the last 10 months has been absolutely amazing and mind-blowing. We now have received 5 million individual campaign contributions. That is more individual campaign contributions than any candidate in the history of the United States of America. Anybody here know what the average campaign contribution is? $27. So to quote Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg, this is a campaign of the people, by the people, and for the people. Now, there is another issue that separates Secretary Clinton from myself. And that is, all of you are aware that in America today, our middle class is shrinking. Almost all new income and wealth go to the top 1%. You are aware that many of the new jobs being created pay wages that are just too low. Now, there are a lot of factors for that, but one of the major reasons is that for the last 30 years, we've had a series of disastrous trade policies written by corporate America. But these trade policies are, whether it's NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, or others, the basic principle was the following. Corporate America will help write these trade agreements. They were saying, why should I pay a worker in Michigan or Vermont a decent wage with decent benefits, negotiate with the union, and have to obey environmental legislation, when I can go to Mexico, I can go to China, I can pay people pennies an hour. That is what they wanted, and that is what they have accomplished because of these disastrous trade agreements. In this country, in the last 15 years, we have seen the loss of 60,000 factories in America. 60,000 factories and millions of decent-paying jobs. While not all of that is attributable to trade, a lot of it is. All of you know of factories and communities all over this country shut down, workers thrown out on the street, factory went to Mexico, factory went to China or some other low-wage country. Hillary Clinton has supported virtually every one of these disastrous trade policies. I have opposed every one of these. Debate, and in order to kind of hide her positions on trade, Secretary Clinton announced that I was an opponent of the bailout of the automobile industry, which is so important here in Michigan and in many, many other states. That is absolutely untrue. There was one vote in terms of whether or not we bailed out the automobile industry in the Senate. December 11th, 2008, I voted for that bailout and support of the workers in the automobile industry. To say otherwise is to not say the truth. Now, there's another area of huge consequence between difference of opinion between Secretary Clinton and myself, and that has to do with foreign policy. In 2002, the Congress debated the most important foreign policy issue in the modern history of this country. I listened very carefully to what President Bush and Vice President Cheney had to say about going to war in Iraq. I not only voted against that war, I helped lead the opposition to going to war in Iraq. And it gives me no pleasure to tell you that much of what I feared would happen is exactly what did happen in terms of the chaos, instability in that region, which has led us to where we are today. Now, Secretary Clinton heard the same evidence that I heard. She voted for that disastrous war. Now, you know, it is very easy when you're a politician to point out what is true. Is there are a lot of terrible, terrible dictators and demagogues all over this world. And Gaddafi of Libya certainly is one of them. But it is not just enough to say that Gaddafi was a tyrant and a dictator. Before you make a decision about overthrowing him, you got to be thinking about what happens the day after he is gone. Regime change does not always work out quite as smoothly as some people think it does. A series of articles in the New York Times recently that made the point the president wasn't quite sure what to do about Libya. Secretary Clinton was one of the more aggressive people to say we've got to go in and overthrow Gaddafi. The result is history, and it is not a good history. Massive instability in Libya. ISIS now has a foothold in that country today. Point being that regime change is more complicated and often has unintended consequences. We've got to be careful about that. On foreign policy, there's another issue, and I wish I could come before you and tell you that I have a magical solution. I don't. And that is, for decades now, there has been hatred and warfare in the Middle East. Everybody knows it. We've had some presidents, Carter, Clinton, others, who have tried to do their best to resolve it. All I can tell you is I will make every single effort to bring rational people on both sides together so that hopefully we can have, through a level playing field, the United States treating everybody in that region equally, hopefully there are people of goodwill in Israel and in the Arab communities. This is not an easy task, but it is a task that we must pursue. We cannot continue to have, for another 60 years, the kind of hatred and conflict that exists. Now, this campaign is doing as well as it is winning caucus after caucus because we are listening to the American people rather than just wealthy campaign contributors. We are listening to workers who tell us they cannot make it on $9 or $10 an hour. That's not enough money for one person, let alone to raise a family. And that is why when we think big and when we determine that in America, no worker working 40 hours a week should live in poverty, we know that we got to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour. This campaign is listening to senior citizens and disabled veterans. A great nation is judged not by how many millionaires and billionaires it has, but by how it treats the weakest and most vulnerable amongst us. That's what matters. There are millions of seniors and disabled veterans in this country who are trying to get by on $11,000, $12,000 a year Social Security. And you know what? Nobody can get by on $11,000 or $12,000 a year Social Security. Unbelievably, there are Republicans out there who actually want to cut Social Security. So I've got some very bad news for them. Not only are we not going to cut Social Security, we are going to expand Social Security. This campaign is listening to young people. And what young people are telling me is, how does it happen that I end up $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 in debt because I simply wanted to get the best education that I could? Again, this is what Keith Ellison was saying. We have got to think outside of the status quo. We all take it for granted. Millions of people in this country are deeply in debt for the crime of getting a higher education. You know what? That's pretty crazy. That is not right. What we want to do is to encourage every American to be able to get all of the education that they need, not punish people for getting an education. That is why we're going to do three things. And again, this may seem radical, but women's rights were considered radical. Gay rights were considered radical. Workers' rights were considered radical. So here is the idea. The idea is that for many, many years, the idea of public education, free public education being first grade to 12th grade was a great idea. Because 40, 50 years ago, you graduated high school, you know what? You could go out there and get a pretty good job. The world has changed. And today, in many respects, a college degree is the equivalent of what a high school degree was 50 years ago. So it seems to me we've got to do three things. Number one, in the year 2016, we have got to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Is this a radical idea? It is absolutely common sense. The world has changed. New type of education is needed to deal with the new technologies and the complicated world out there. People need different types and more education. Second of all, you got countries like Germany and Scandinavia. That's exactly what they're doing today. Third thing, this will shock some of you. 50, 60 years ago, guess what? Public colleges and universities in the United States of America were virtually tuition free. This is not a radical idea. It's exactly what we should do. Second thing we should do is that people are carrying heavy student debt. We've got to lower that debt by allowing them to refinance their loans. Now, as you know, 2008, after Wall Street's reckless and illegal behavior drove this economy into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression, the Congress bailed out Wall Street. Bailed out the wealthiest, most powerful institution in America. Well, I think that now what we need to do is impose a tax on Wall Street speculation which will raise the money we need to lower student debt and make public colleges and universities tuition free. You help bail out Wall Street. Now it is Wall Street's turn to help the middle class. Campaign is listening to women. And what women are saying is, how does it happen that they sit in an office or a factory and they end up making 79 cents on the dollar compared to the guy who's in the other room? I know that every man in this room will stand with the women in the fight for pay equity for women workers. This campaign is listening to our brothers and sisters in the African American community. And what they are telling us is that we have a broken criminal justice system, which ends up having more people in jail than any other country on earth. Shamefully, absurdly, we are spending $80 billion a year to lock up 2.2 million Americans, disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native Americans. Now, one of the reasons for that is that youth unemployment in this country is outrageously high. For young whites, 33% for high school graduates, Latinos 36%, African Americans 51%. You want to hear a radical idea? All right, here's the radical idea. We're going to invest in education and jobs for our young people, not jails and incarceration. This campaign is listening to our Latino brothers and sisters. And what they are telling us is that they are tired of living in fear, living in the shadows, and I agree with them when they say we need comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. This campaign is listening to Native Americans, people who have been treated shamefully for hundreds of years. We owe the first Americans so much, and it's time that we started paying back that debt. Now, there is a lot of anger out there today in the United States, and I'll tell you one of the reasons why there is so much anger. In my state, here in Michigan, throughout this country, you got millions of people working longer hours for lower wages. You have families where mom is working long hours, dad's working long hours, kids are working long hours. Marriages are being stressed and destroyed because parents don't have quality time to spend together. Kids are not getting the attention they deserve because everybody is working. And meanwhile, despite the fact that we work so hard, and here in America, not a lot of people know this, we work the longest hours of any people in the industrialized world. You all know that? Japanese are very, very hard workers. We work longer hours than they do in Japan. And yet, despite all of that, 58% of all new income created today goes to the top 1%. Today in America, we have a worse level, a more grotesque level of wealth inequality than any other major country on earth, worse today than since 1928. In America today, the top 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Wealthiest 20 people own more wealth than the bottom half of America, 150 million people. What our job is and what we can do together is to create an economy that works for all of us, not just wealthy campaign. Real unemployment in this country is not 4.9%. That's official unemployment. Real unemployment is double that. Youth unemployment, as I mentioned, is off the charts. I was in Flint, Michigan a couple of weeks ago talking to people who have been impacted by poisoned water. And we had a town meeting there as well. And the conclusion that I reached is that it was really in talking to these people and listening to their pain and I don't even want to speak about what I heard because it is so painful, about children being poisoned and the implications of that, what it means to kids' lives. That was happening in the United States of America in the year 2016 was literally hard to believe. It was like I was talking to people in a third or fourth world country, not the richest country in the history of the world. In the richest country in the history of the world, our infrastructure, our water system, our wastewater plants, our roads, our bridges, our rail system, levees, dams should not be crumbling. And that is why we have got to rebuild our water systems in Flint and all over this country, rebuild our infrastructure, and when we do that, we can create 13 million decent homes. Now, Republicans go around the country and they talk a lot about family values. I want you all to know what they mean by that. What they mean is that no woman in this room, in this state, in this country, should have the right to control her own body. I disagree. What they mean is that our gay brothers and sisters should not have the right to be married. I disagree. But when I talk about family values, it is a little bit different than Republican family values. This is what I talk about. I talk about ending the international embarrassment of the United States being the only major country on earth that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave. There is a woman today in Michigan or Vermont, throughout this country, who is having some beautiful baby today, and that is a great day. But if that woman is working class or low income, do you know what happens to her relationship to her baby? What happens is that in a week or 2 weeks after birth, she is forced to separate herself from that baby, go back to work, earn enough income to take care of her family. That is wrong. A mom and a dad have the right to stay home with their newborn baby. That is why together we will pass legislation now in the Congress guaranteeing 3 months paid family and medical leave. When we talk about what goes on in this country and billionaires buying elections and Wall Street putting all kinds of money into super PACs, you and I know that is not democracy, that is oligarchy. And that is why we are going to overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court. I am a member of the U.S. Senate Committee on the Environment and on Energy. I have talked to scientists all over our country and all over the world. The debate is over. Climate change is real. It is caused by human activity. It is already doing devastating harm in our country and around the world. We have a moral responsibility to make sure that this planet, our only planet, is left to future generations in a way that is healthy and is habitable. And what the scientists are telling us, this is what they're saying very clearly. If we do not get our act together and get our act together in a very short time, this planet, by the end of this century, will be between 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. And you know what that means? It means more drought, more flooding, more extreme weather disturbances, more acidification and destruction of our own oceans. It means more rising sea levels and the flooding of coastal communities. It means more international conflict as people around the world fight over limited natural resources. We must have the courage to take on the fossil fuel industry and tell them we are going to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Leaving this planet in a way that is healthy for future generations is a heck of a lot more important than the short-term profits of oil companies or coal companies. Let me connect some dots here and to tell you what a corrupt campaign finance system means to sensible policies. You may have noticed, TV doesn't talk about it too much, but you may have noticed not one Republican candidate for president will go before you and say, you know, I've talked to the scientists, I've read the literature, climate change is real, we've got to do something about it. Not one. Not one. And the reason for that is that on the day that Republican comes forward and says that climate change is real, on that day that candidate loses his funding from the fossil fuel industry. That is what a corrupt campaign finance system does. That is not dissimilar from the fact that all of you and all Americans are paying the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. You think it's an accident that the pharmaceutical industry pours huge amounts of money into campaign contributions and huge amounts of money into lobbying? That's what you get when you buy Congress. You get the ability to charge the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs in this country. And if you're Wall Street, what your campaign contributions bring you is the ability to overturn legislation like Glass-Steagall, the ability to make sure that Wall Street can do what it wants to do. That's what money buys. And that's why we have got to change this campaign finance. There has been many, many issues that I have been attacked on, but one maybe more than any other. And that is that I recognize that in every major country on earth, whether it is the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, Holland, Scandinavia, or our neighbors to the north in Canada, all of those countries manage to provide health care to all of their people. The United States today is the only major country on earth that does not do that. I think that is wrong. It is my belief, let me say it again, to be as crystal clear as I can. In my view, health care is a right of all people, not a privilege. When we think big, we have got to ask ourselves, how does it happen today, despite the good gains of the Affordable Care Act, 29 million Americans have no health insurance? Many of you in this room and millions of Americans do have health insurance, but you are underinsured with high deductibles and copayments. Am I right? Some of you, I bet, have $5,000 in deductibles, right? Some of you have more than that, right? And what does it mean if you have a high deductible and not a lot of money? It means you don't go to the doctor when you should. And we pay, as I mentioned, the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Meanwhile, despite all of those problems, we are spending far, far more than any other major country per person on healthcare. We're spending almost 3 times what the British spend, 50% more than the French, far more than the Canadians. And that is why it is my view that this country must move toward a Medicare for all healthcare system. Been told, well, Bernie, my critics say this, my opponent says, Bernie's a nice guy, but, just can't win a general election. Just can't beat those Republicans. Let me just say, polls go up and down. Sometimes they're not always reliable, but here's the fact. Virtually every national poll that has taken place has Bernie Sanders defeating Donald Trump. And almost all of those national polls and many, many state polls have Bernie Sanders defeating Donald Trump by much wider margins than Hillary Clinton. Here in Michigan, for example, just a poll out the other day, Hillary Clinton did very well against Trump. She beat him in the poll by 16 points. That's very good. We beat him by 22 points. State after state. Now, the reason that we will together defeat Trump if he is the Republican candidate is not complicated. And that is that the American people are not going to elect as president somebody who insults Muslims. One of the largest religions in the world. That's not the kind of guy they're going to elect as president. No. Somebody who insults Mexicans and our neighbors to the south. American people are not going to elect a president who every day is insulting women. African Americans. Let us not forget, people sometimes do. One of the more, President Obama, who I've known for many, many years, has been subjected not only to more obstructionism on the part of Republicans, unprecedented legislative obstructionism, but it has gone further than that.
It's racism.
President Obama, as you know, Donald Trump, a few years ago, led the so-called birther effort. And what that birther effort was about was a very, very significant thing. What he was trying to do is to delegitimize the President of the United States. What he was saying is this guy's not really the president because he really was not born in the United States of America. Absolutely blatant lie. Now, here's the interesting thing. President Obama's father was born in Kenya. My father was born in Poland. Nobody has ever asked me for my birth certificate. have something to do with the color of my skin versus Obama's skin. We're going to defeat Donald Trump because the American people understand that bringing people together trumps dividing people up. People understand that community, helping each other, trumps selfishness. And most importantly, the American people understand what every great religion on earth, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, whatever the religion is, and that is that love trumps hatred. Tomorrow, Michigan has a very important role to play in the fight for fundamental change in America and a political revolution. We will win if there is a large voter turnout. Please make that happen.